My sister got a job, and the next day, my parents kicked me out, calling me a freeloader. Unaware that I was the CEO of the company she joined, I packed my bags and left. The next day, when she saw me in her office, she mocked, "Are you here for a cleaning job?" I calmly replied, "No, I'm the CEO." Suddenly, her face turned pale. I'm Sarah, and I've always felt like the odd one in my family. From the moment I was born, I could tell I wasn't exactly what my dad had hoped for. He really wanted a son, and when the doctor said it was a girl, I could see the disappointment on his face. That moment seemed to set the tone for how he viewed me for a long time. My older sister Lisa was the golden child. She was smart, talented, and could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I felt like I was just there. Our house was always filled with praise for Lisa's latest achievements. Did you hear Lisa got an A on her math test? Or look at the beautiful painting Lisa made. My report cards barely got any reaction, and my crayon drawings often ended up in the trash. As I got older, I learned to take care of myself. I started making my own lunches, doing my own laundry, and figuring out my homework on my own. It wasn't great, but it made me independent and strong. I didn't rely on anyone to help me out because I knew no one really would. Then, when I was about 15, something happened that completely changed my life. One day after school, I found myself hungry, and since no one was home to make me a snack, I decided to try something new, baking cookies. I grabbed an old cookbook of Mom's, followed a recipe, and to my surprise, they actually turned out pretty well. The next day, I took some to school, and a classmate named Melissa tried one. Her eyes widened as she took a bite and said, "Sarah, these are amazing. Did your mom make them?" I smiled and said, "No, I did." Word spread quickly, and soon, kids were asking me to bring more. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had found something I was actually good at, something that made people notice me. It felt amazing. When I got home that day, I was so excited to tell my parents about what had happened. "Mom, Dad, guess what? I made cookies, and everyone at school loved them." Mom barely looked up from her magazine and said, "That's nice, dear. Just make sure you clean up the kitchen." Dad, on the other hand, frowned and said, "Cookies, Sarah? You should focus on your studies, not waste your time in the kitchen." My heart sank, but I tried not to let their reactions take away my excitement. I had found something I loved doing, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me from pursuing it. As time went on, the gap between Lisa and me only seemed to grow. Lisa graduated high school with top grades and got accepted into a prestigious college. You would have thought our parents had won the lottery the way they celebrated. Meanwhile, I was still in high school, with decent but unremarkable grades. But I had found my passion. I was baking. Every weekend, I baked cakes, pies, and cookies. Before long, even the neighbors started placing orders, and I had my own little business going. One day, Mrs. Daniel, who lived next door, took a bite of my chocolate cake and said, "Sarah, honey, this is amazing. You have a real talent." I smiled proudly and said, "Thanks. I'm thinking about going to culinary school after I graduate." Her eyes lit up and she said, "Oh, that's wonderful. You'd do great." But when I shared that dream with my parents, their reactions couldn't have been more different. Mom's face dropped. "Culinary school? But that's just cooking," she said dismissively. Dad's reaction was even worse. He slammed his fist on the table. "Absolutely not. No daughter of mine is going to waste her life in a kitchen." I try to argue, "But Dad, I'm good at it. People love my baking." He scoffed. "Good. So what? You think you can make a living flipping burgers or decorating cakes? Wake up, Sarah. The real world doesn't work like that." Mom added softly, but with the same dismissive tone. "Honey, you need to think about your future. Look at Lisa, she's studying finance. She'll have a real career." Their words hurt. They really did. But I wasn't ready to give up on my dream. I kept baking, and soon I started selling my treats at school events and to classmates. The response was overwhelming. "Sarah, these cookies are incredible," my friend Ryan said, his mouth full of chocolate chip cookies. "You should open a bakery or something." I smiled, imagining it, a little bakery of my own, filled with the smell of fresh bread and pastries. It felt like a dream, but at home, that dream quickly turned into a nightmare. One day, Dad found a flyer for one of my bake sales. "What's this?" he demanded. I swallowed nervously. "It's for school. We're raising money for new computers." He glared at me. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I know you've been selling your treats. This stops now. You need to focus on your real studies, not this hobby." "But Dad, I'm making good money," I said, my voice shaking. "Money," he snapped. "You call a few dollars for cookies money? Do you know how much your sister makes in her internship? That's real money. That's a real future." I bit my lip, trying not to cry. But before I could say anything else, he cut me off. "No, you didn't think. Listen carefully. This baking nonsense ends now. You're going to get your grades up and apply to real colleges. If I hear about one more cake or cookie, we'll cut you off. No more college fund, no more support. Got it. That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling like my dream of culinary school had crumbled into nothing, like an overcooked cookie. The next day, I started researching business colleges. My heart was heavy, but I was determined. Somehow, someday, I would find a way to follow my passion. But for now, I had to play by their rules. College passed in a blur of numbers, spreadsheets, and financial reports. I focused hard on my accounting studies, trying to convince myself that it was the right choice. But every time I passed a bakery or smelled fresh bread, my heart ached for the dream I had left behind. After I graduated and got my degree, I managed to land a job at a big company, and my parents couldn't have been happier. I rented a small apartment, determined to live on my own and prove that I could make it. But as I sat at my desk day after day, doing numbers and reports, I felt like I was slowly fading inside. It was like I was watching my life pass by without truly living it. One evening, I just couldn't take it anymore. I pulled out my old recipe book, its pages worn and stained from happier times, and decided to bake a batch of cupcakes. I lost myself in the process of mixing the ingredients and filling the kitchen with the smell of baking. It was a little moment of joy, like I had rediscovered a part of myself that had been buried under all the spreadsheets and reports. The next day, I brought the cupcakes to work. The response was immediate. "Oh my God, Sarah, these are amazing," my CO worker Shirley said. "Where did you buy them?" I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Actually, I made them." Word spread quickly, and soon people were asking if I could make cakes for their birthdays, kids' parties, and even weddings. I started small, taking just a few orders on the weekends, but before I knew it, I was spending all my free time in the kitchen. My little apartment was always filled with the sweet smells of vanilla and chocolate. I was doing what I loved, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. Then the big moment came. Our company's anniversary was coming up, and the director came up to me one day. "Sarah, I hear you're quite the baker," he said with a smile. "How would you feel about making the cake for our anniversary parties?" My heart raced. It was a huge opportunity, but also a big risk. If the cake didn't turn out well, I'd look foolish, but I couldn't say no. The day of the party arrived, and I brought in a huge cake decorated with the company's logo and delicate sugar flowers. When I unveiled it, the room went quiet. Then the director grinned and said, "This is incredible. Everyone, give it up for Sarah, our accounting wizard and apparently, our master pastry chef." The room erupted into applause and the director even hugged me, whispering in my ear, "You're wasted in accounting, Sarah. This is your true calling." His words stuck with me, and as more cake orders came in, I realized I had a choice to make. I was working 3 full-time jobs, accountant by day, baker by night. Something had to give. One sleepless night, covered in flour and surrounded by cake orders, I made my decision. The next day I handed in my resignation. My supervisor was shocked. "But why?" "You're one of our best," she said. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I found my true passion," I replied simply. I rented a small commercial kitchen and threw myself into my new business. It was both scary and exciting at the same time. There were nights I stayed up all night filling orders, and days when I questioned if I had made a huge mistake. But little by little, my bakery started to grow. I hired my first employee, then my second. We moved to a bigger space, and soon my cakes and pastries were becoming well known across the city. Through it all, I kept it a secret from my parents. As far as they knew, I was still a successful accountant climbing the corporate ladder. I kept telling myself I was just waiting for the right time to tell them the truth, but deep down, I was just scared. Scared of their disappointment, scared of their anger, scared of being rejected. As my bakery business grew, I realized I needed to step up my game. I jumped into modern marketing determined to make my shop stand out. I created social media pages for the bakery and posted photos of my creations every day. But I was careful not to show myself. No selfies, no pictures of me as the baker, just the cakes, cookies, and pastries. Despite my fears, the business took off. I partnered with a local delivery service to reach more customers around the city. I started a loyalty program, offering discounts to returning customers. Then came my big idea, Sweet Tooth Saturdays. Once a month we opened our doors and offered free samples to anyone who stopped by. The first time, I was so nervous. What if no one came? I worried out loud to my employee, Julie. She rolled her eyes and said, "Boss, have you tasted your own stuff? People will be lining up around the block." She was right. By noon, there was a long line down the street. Seeing people's faces light up after tasting my treats filled me with a joy that had nothing to do with the ovens. Our popularity skyrocketed. Soon, we were catering high-profile events, supplying desserts to fancy restaurants, and even shipping our signature cookies across the country. With success came money, more money than I ever thought I'd make, especially just from baking cookies, like my dad used to say. Before I knew it, I was earning more than my sister's salary from her finance job. I started helping my parents financially, still pretending it was all from my accounting job. When their roof needed fixing, I paid for it. When they talked about wanting to visit Europe, surprised them with tickets. "Oh, Sarah, you shouldn't have," Mom said, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. While I was building my business and helping our parents, Lisa was living her best life. She still lived at home and spent her entire paycheck on designer clothes, fancy gadgets, and her obsession with self-care. But none of that mattered to my parents. To them, Lisa was still the star. "Did you hear about Lisa's promotion?" They'd say. Mom would always beam with pride and say, "Vice president of her department at only 30. I'd force a smile and say, "That's great, Lisa, congrats." Meanwhile, I was running a successful bakery, employing a dozen people, and making hundreds of customers happy every day. But in our house, none of that seemed to matter. It was like none of my achievements counted for anything. One day, at Sweet Dreams Bakery, everything started just like any other. I was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake when Julie burst in, waving an order form. "Boss, you're not going to believe this," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. I wiped my hands on my apron and asked, "We just got an order for a birthday cake," she said, pausing for dramatic effect. "The delivery address is," she looked at me, her voice lowering, "your parents' house." For a moment, it felt like I had been hit with cold water. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice shaking. She nodded and handed me the form. There it was in black and white, my childhood address, Mom's name, and even a note saying it was for her birthday. My heart stopped for a moment, and I couldn't breathe, but then a plan started to form in my mind. "Julie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was racing, "clear my schedule. This cake is going to be my masterpiece." For the next week, I poured everything I had into that cake. 3 tiers of my mom's favorite flavors, decorated with hand-piped flowers and delicate sugar sculptures. It was the best cake I had ever made. As I worked, I imagined the scene, my parents' faces when they saw the cake, their pride when they realized I had made it, and the joy of finally showing them who I really was. The day of the party came, and I arrived early, carrying a small gift to keep up the act. The house was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years. "Sarah," Aunt Helen said, hugging me, "look at you, all grown up, still crunching numbers." I nodded, the usual light catching in my throat. Yep, still at it. I couldn't wait for my cake to arrive from the bakery. Then the doorbell rang. Mom answered, and there stood the delivery guy, holding the familiar Sweet Dreams bakery box. "Special delivery for the birthday girl," he said cheerfully. The room went silent as Mom carried the box to the dining room table. She lifted the lid, and everyone gasped. There were murmurs of appreciation as they took in the cake in all its glory. I stood there, heart racing, waiting for the right moment to speak, but before I could say anything, Dad cleared his throat. "Before we celebrate," he said, his voice serious, "there's something we need to address." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to face my parents, whose faces were filled with what looked like disgust. "We recently discovered something," Mom said, her voice cold, "a secret that's been kept from us." The tension in the room was unbearable. I felt frozen in place as my father spoke again, his voice full of anger. "Can you believe it?" he said, pointing at me. "Our Sarah has been lying to us all this time. She's not an accountant. She's a pastry chef." He spat the words like they were the worst thing in the world. I tried to speak, to explain myself, but no words came out. This couldn't be happening. Dad's face was red with rage. "We always dreamed our daughters would find real success," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "Become respected members of society." He pointed to Lisa, like she was the only one who mattered. "Like your sister, vice president at her age. That's something to be proud of." Lisa looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze, but Mom didn't stop. "We gave you everything. Every chance," she said, staring right at me. "And this is how you repay us? By becoming an ordinary cook." The word ordinary hit me harder than I could have imagined. Didn't they see what I had built? Didn't they understand? Suddenly, Dad walked over to the table where my cake sat. Without warning, he flipped the box over. I watched in shock as my beautiful cake, the masterpiece I had worked so hard on, crashed to the floor in a mess of icing and sponge. The guests gasped. "We're not eating this," Dad said with a sneer. "It's beneath us." Mom nodded in agreement. "Sarah, you've shown us you don't belong with respectable people. You've disobeyed us for the last time." Dad's next words felt like a punch to my chest. "We disown you. You're no longer our daughter." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. I looked around the room, hoping anyone would stand up for me. But everyone avoided my gaze. Even Aunt Helen, who had hugged me earlier, now whispered to Uncle Walter. I always knew she was trouble. Others nodded, agreeing with her. The room, which had been full of celebration just moments ago, now felt cold and hostile. Leave, Mom said, her voice as cold as ice. Leave now, and don't ever contact us again. I stood there, frozen, tears streaming down my face. How could they do this? How could they dismiss everything I had accomplished? How could they not see me for who I really was? It felt so cruel. Didn't you hear your mother? Dad barked. Get out. Somehow I found the strength to move. I turned and walked toward the door, my vision blurred by tears. As I reached for the handle, I heard Lisa's voice, soft and unsure. Mom, Dad, maybe we should. But her words were cut off as the door slammed behind me. I stumbled down the front steps, the same steps I had climbed so many times as a child. But now, they felt strange and unwelcoming. I made it to my car, and that's when the sobs hit me. Sitting there, surrounded by the pieces of the family I thought I knew, everything crumbled. I had just lost something. Something deep inside me broke. The dream I had held on to for so long, the one where my parents would finally accept and understand me, had shattered. It was like that dream had crumbled just like my cake on their dining room floor. I don't even know how long I sat there crying. But by the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood I grew up in, I knew one thing for sure. I could never come back here again. The days after that birthday party passed in a blur. I moved like a ghost, barely eating, hardly sleeping. The bakery kept running, thanks to my amazing staff. But I was just going through the motions. Slowly, as the shock faded, I threw myself into my work with a new energy. If my family couldn't appreciate my passion, then I'd show the world how great and ordinary cooks could be. The bakery flourished. We expanded to a second location, then a third. Magazine features, TV spots, and even a cookbook deal followed. Success came in waves, and I rode each one with determination. I bought a beautiful apartment, my own little haven in the city. 3 years after the fallout with my family, I met Henry. He was kind, supportive, and thought my cakes were the best thing ever. When he proposed a year later, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small, but perfect. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my friends and the family I had chosen, I realized I didn't miss my blood relatives at all. All these people, my employees, my friends, my husband, were my real family now. Life settled into a happy routine. The bakery continued to thrive, and Henry and I built a wonderful life together. I had everything I ever wanted, except maybe closure. That changed one Friday afternoon. For years after that fateful birthday party, I had been in my office, looking over plans for a new bakery location when my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized, but something made me pick it up. Hello, I said. Sarah, came my mother's voice, unsure but clear. Please don't hang up. We need to talk. What followed was a flood of information. The bank where Lisa worked had lost its license. There had been massive layoffs, and Lisa had been out of work for months. They needed help. Before I could fully process it all, I heard my father's voice cut in. You need to give Lisa a job at your bakery, he said, as the director. Lisa has real business experience. She should run things, and you can just be one of the bakers. The absurdity of it all hit me. After 4 years of silence, this was why they were reaching out? A cold laugh escaped me. Let me get this straight, I said. You disown me, throw me out, and now you're asking me to give up my business to Lisa? We gave you life, my dad shouted. We raised you. You owe us something. Something inside me snapped. All the pain and anger I had held back for years came rushing out. I owe you nothing, I said, my voice calm but firm. You made your choice 4 years ago. I'm not your daughter anymore, remember? I'm just an ordinary cook beneath you. I won't be helping you or Lisa. Goodbye. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. For a moment, I just sat there, letting it all sink in. Then slowly, a smile crept onto my face. I felt lighter, like a weight I didn't even know I had been carrying was finally gone. I owed them nothing. I was free. Just when I thought my family saga was over, life surprised me again. One quiet Monday afternoon, my phone rang, showing a number I hadn't seen in years. Lisa's number. Feeling both curious and nervous, I answered. Hellos, I said. Sarah, Lisa's voice was soft and hesitant. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I took a deep breath. It's okay, Lisa. What's going on? What followed was a conversation that changed everything. Lisa apologized over and over for how her parents had treated me, both recently and 4 years ago. I had no idea they called you asking for a job, she said, her voice full of emotion. I would never have asked for that. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I felt a knot in my chest begin to loosen. "Thank you, Lisa. That means a lot," I said. She went on to explain how losing her job had been a wake-up call. "I realized I'd been living someone else's dream," she said. Banking, finance. It was never what I wanted. It was always Mom and Dad's vision for me. I listened, barely breathing, as my sister poured her heart out. "Seeing you follow your passion and build this amazing business, it inspired me, Sarah," she said. "I've decided to change my life. I've enrolled in interior design courses. I want to create beautiful spaces and be true to myself, like you have." Tears filled my eyes. All these years I had thought Lisa was the perfect one, living the best life. I never imagined she had been struggling in her own way, just like me. But now, she was finding her own path. And so was I. "That's wonderful, Lisa," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm really happy for you." There was a pause. And then Lisa's voice came through again, full of feeling. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," she said. "You stood up for yourself, followed your dreams, and now you're living the life you want. That's amazing." I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. All the years of pent-up feelings, hurt, anger, and the longing for my sister came rushing out. We talked for hours, catching up on lost time, sharing our hopes, our fears. Everything that had been left unsaid for so long. It felt like the distance between us, the one that had been there for years, was finally starting to shrink. As the conversation wound down, Lisa hesitantly suggested, Maybe we could meet up sometime just to talk, support each other." I found myself nodding, even though she couldn't see me. "I'd like that, Lisa. I'd really like that." Over the next few months, Lisa and I met regularly. We shared coffee and pastries from my bakery, of course, and laughed about old memories. We supported each other through the ups and downs of our careers. Lisa's interior design business was taking off, and I couldn't have been prouder. As for our parents, we heard through the grapevine that they had disowned Lisa too, when she quit banking. They told anyone who would listen that their daughters had disappointed them. One a simple cook, the other a frivolous decorator. But Lisa and I knew the truth. We were living our dreams, building successful careers, and doing what we loved. We had found our own paths to happiness, even if it wasn't the path our parents had envisioned for us. One day, during one of our weekly meetups at my bakery, Lisa looked around at the busy shop, and then back at me with a smile. "You know," she said, "I think we turned out pretty great, all things considered." I laughed, feeling warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the ovens. "Yeah," I agreed, "I think we did." As I watched my sister sketch design ideas on a napkin, surrounded by the sweet smell of pastries and the chatter of happy customers, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was my life, messy and challenging but sweet. I had fought for my dreams, lost some battles, but in the end, I had won the war.